Good evening and welcome to the May 21st, 2013 Planning Commission meeting for City of San Bruno. Roll call, please.
Chair Biasotti.
Here.
Vice Chair Peterson.
Here.
Commissioner Marshall.
Here.
Commissioner Johnson.
Here.
Commissioner Chase. Absent. Commissioner Samut. Commissioner Mishra.
Here. Commissioner Mishra, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Sure.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, item 1, approval of minutes for April 16th, 2013.
Move the minutes be approved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, any opposed? Okay, the minutes are approved. Communications, item 2.
We have no communications this evening.
Thank you very much. Item 3, public comments. Is there anyone in the public who'd like to speak on an item that's not on the agenda this evening? No? Okay. Public comment is closed. Announcement of conflict of interest. Anybody? Okay, no conflicts tonight. Moving on to item 5A, 235 Linden Avenue. This is a request for a use permit to allow an addition which exceeds the gross floor area ratio by greater than 50%. Sections 12-230B1, 12-220-30B2, 12-120-10A, and 12-280C. Staff report, please.
Thank you and good evening. As stated, the applicant has applied for a use permit, minor modification, and parking exception to expand the home at 235 Linden Avenue. The site is located on the north side of Linden Avenue and is currently developed with a one-story single-family home. The existing home contains 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a living room, dining room, kitchen, and a 1-car garage. The applicant is proposing a first and second story addition. The first story includes a new family room, dining room, a larger front entry, and a larger garage. The first floor addition amounts to 717 square feet. The second floor includes 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms, amounting to 968 square feet. Combined, the home will contain a total of 5 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms. The overall living area would be 2,409 square feet, with a 487 square foot garage. The project was reviewed at the April Architectural Review Committee meeting. At that meeting, the committee forwarded the project on to the Planning Commission with a favorable recommendation. There were 3 minor recommendations. Staff recommended that a written statement describing the proposed green building measures be included, which is now attached to Exhibit D within your staff report. The Architectural Review Committee added a recommendation to ensure all windows are of a consistent type, meaning horizontal or vertical sliding windows where feasible. Vertical sliding windows were incorporated along the entire left side second story addition. Additionally, 2 windows along the rear and front elevation were modified to incorporate vertical sliding windows. Lastly, staff recommended that the eave of the garage expansion be eliminated as it's encroaching into the 3-foot side yard setback. The plans were not updated. However, staff has added a specific condition of approval requiring that eave to be eliminated at the time of building permit submittal. And again, that's for compliance with the 3-foot side yard setback requirement. As proposed, the project requires a use permit, minor modification, and parking exception. A use permit is required as the gross floor area of the existing home will be expanded by greater than 50%, and the proposal also exceeds the 0.55 FAR guideline. Home sizes within the neighborhood fall somewhere in the range on the small side of 910 square feet to the large side of 2,260 square feet. This home will be 2,897 square feet, resulting in a 0.58 FAR. However, staff does find that the proposal is consistent with the residential design guidelines. The applicant has also incorporated specific design measures which also help reduce that mass or the mass of the second story addition. Specifically, the second story right side elevation is set back 18 inches from the first story below, The second-story left side elevation is set back 11 feet from the first story below, and the front elevation incorporates a varying setback from the first floor below, ranging from 12 feet 6 inches to 16 feet. Staff also finds that the proposed exterior finishes will blend with the existing home and neighborhood. A minor modification is also required to continue 2 existing non-conforming side yard setbacks. One thing that is important to note is that the existing home has substandard setbacks, which is a common development pattern within the neighborhood. Specifically, the existing front setback is 10 feet where 15 feet is required. Additionally, the home has a 4-foot 6-inch right side yard setback and a 3-foot left side yard setback where 5 feet is required. The first floor will be expanded to accommodate a new family room, which will continue the existing 4-foot 6-inch right side yard setback. Additionally, the garage will be expanded to continue the existing 3-foot left side yard setback to accommodate a new tandem garage. Staff finds that the continuation of the non-conforming side yard setbacks is compatible with the existing home and the overall development pattern of the neighborhood. Lastly, a parking exception is required for a tandem garage. As you know, the municipal code requires a second covered parking space when the overall living area exceeds 1,825 square feet. In this particular instance, the proposal amounts to 2,409 square feet of living area. Given the location and the layout of the existing home, there are really limited opportunities to have a garage in a side-by-side setting. Therefore, the applicant opted to, or is proposing a tandem garage. The first half of the garage will measure 10 feet wide, and the second half of the garage will measure 12 feet 6 inches wide. The overall length of the garage will be 40 feet. Additionally, I would like to point out that there is sufficient space within the driveway to accommodate an extra automobile. There's actually 29 feet from the back edge of sidewalk to the face of the garage, so at no point would a car block the public right-of-way if parked in the driveway. Staff did send a courtesy notice and the required 300-foot public notice, and we did not receive any comments from neighbors. Overall, staff supports the project, and we do find that the addition is consistent with the residential design guidelines. Staff would recommend that the Planning Commission approve the use permit minor modification and parking exception request, subject to findings of fact 1 through 11 and conditions of approval 1 through 25. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Through the chair, I know I'm being real petty on this, and that's not my style, but isn't that the west side of the street, not the north side of the street? I don't think it makes a difference, but just to make since your report is so good, besides that.
You are correct. That would be
Thank
the
you.
west side of the street.
Anyone else? Thank you, Matt. Would the applicant like to speak on your project, please? You step to the podium, just give us your name. Thank you.
My name is Maria Sakos. I am the owner of the 235 residence. Due to my family is expanding, we've been at this area for 12 years. The children are small now, they're at 9 and 12, so we do need to expand the house. We do like the area, so at this time we would like your request to have an approval on this permit. Thank you.
Hang on. Is there anyone who'd like to ask a question? With the applicant?
Through the chair,
Mary?
have you read all the conditions of approval
Yes.
and you agree with them?
Yes.
Any comments?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? No? Okay. Is there anyone from the public who'd like to speak on this? Oh, apparently not. So we'll take it back to the commission for comment or vote.
Through the chair,
Commissioner Richard.
a question to staff. Were there any public comments or via email or anything like that?
There were no public comments.
Through the chair,
Commissioner.
I'd like to make a motion to approve use permit 12-14, minor modification 13-3, and parking exception 13-1 based on findings of fact 1 through 11 and conditions of approval 1 through 25.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. There's a 10-day appeal period. You're welcome. Okay. Item 6, city staff discussion.
Through the chair, at your last Planning Commission meeting, there was some discussion about a particular application, and a number of comments came up regarding that application. It was 2081 Whitman Way, and staff decided to do some follow-up to actually go out to the site, meet with the building inspector, and basically determine what was the nature of the comments made by some of the public members, and was there any merit to those comments? And Laura Russell, our associate planner, has prepared a report, and that report is based on a site visit, a meeting with the inspector who oversees that project, and I think it provides a good follow-up to the items that were raised at that meeting. We did receive one follow-up email as well after the meeting, and Laura will have a presentation for you.
So you received the memo in your packet, and I'd like to highlight some of the key findings of that. This was a collaboration between planning and building to do some of this research and be able to report back to you, since a lot of this authority rests with the building division as opposed to with the planning staff. So we've been working together on this to ensure that we understand what's in the records, what inspections have taken place, be able to answer any questions and follow up on the concerns that came forward at the last meeting. So one of the key items, and I think we covered this last time, but just so that everybody is clear, there's one overall large permit for the vast majority of the exterior work at the Park Plaza site. That includes almost all of the elements from the architectural review permit, almost all of the exterior work that you see, the landscaping and the site work and those things that you reviewed previously. That primary building permit is still open. It has not been finalized. They do have a correction list. We're getting close to the end, but they do have a correction list that's joint planning, building, and engineering. And so they are following up on some of those final items that are on the list. Through the course of construction, the building inspectors have done over 20 progress inspections on that primary building permit. There are also a number of smaller building permits for specific things like plumbing, for electrical. In regards to some of the items that you can see on the site, there's a separate building permit for the front entrance canopy and the signage, and there's a separate building permit for the aesthetic element that covers the fire escape. All of those separate permits have also received the appropriate progress inspections as they've gone through the process. Obviously, those require a lot fewer inspections, but those have been occurring on site as well. So there are some, like I said, some final inspections that will take place for the overall exterior project that's been going on there. There was a question about work that was unfinished, or a question about some work being unfinished. This came up both at the meeting as well as in the email that we received after the meeting. So to report back on that, there are 2 open permits in regards to the fire suppression system. So you'll recall that as part of this project, they're getting an overall fire sprinkler system. And so that work is ongoing. We did observe when we were out in the field that it is essentially completed. There is some finished work that needs to be done, some kind of closing up of the stucco and things like that around it. And staff will be in coordination with the fire marshal to make sure that that gets closed out in an appropriate time frame. There was also a question about some walkways on site and whether those repairs had been finished. We observed that the walkways did appear to be all finished when we were out on the site this week, as the property management had indicated to us that they would be. There was kind of an overall question about the quality and the phasing of the work, and you'll recall that we discussed this a little bit at the last meeting, but just to highlight it a little bit again tonight. Staff has very limited authority to regulate the quality of the work if it meets the building code. And so there may be an aesthetic standard that we would all strive to, that we encourage our applicants to meet, but we don't always have the authority to require it. So we do require that they meet the building code and follow all the steps and get the inspections to do that. And then also, as you know, when there's an architectural review permit, we hold the applicant to the standard that's approved as part of the architectural review permit. So staff has been working very closely with the applicant in regards to the elements of the building that are on the exterior and visible from the public right-of-way, because those are the things that we have the authority over within that architectural review permit. So through the process, for example, we've reviewed all of the exterior colors, the fixtures, the finishes, the materials. We've done that over the course of approximately 4 site visits and over 8 meetings in the office to review all of those exterior items over the course of the construction period. In the memo, there's kind of some specifics about some of the questions that were raised about exterior lighting. So you can see in the memo our findings on that. We found those items to be in good repair, everything that we could see, as well as the recent concrete pours were in good repair, and they were inspected by an outside inspector to make sure that all the compaction was right. So the records do demonstrate that that concrete was poured in the appropriate manner, and we see that visually it looks how we would expect. There are some very minor cracks, but that's going to be often seen in larger slab pours, and the cracks we did see were on the rear patios, so nothing structural, just maybe a minor aesthetic element that would be not of a concern for a building code issue. And then in regards to construction phasing, the only authority that the city has over phasing is really in relationship to meeting the building code and making sure people are doing their work in the correct order and getting their progress inspections. There are phasing requirements on the condo conversion, as you know, for some of the other items not related to construction. So benefits and things like that, those things we can control the phasing because there's a direct correlation to the entitlement that they received for the condo conversion. But once the building permit is issued, that owner and that contractor has a certain amount of freedom to conduct that construction in any reasonable manner that meets the building code and also complies with the legal requirements that they may have to notify their tenants under their normal leases. One of the more significant concerns that came up is in relationship to dry rot, and I think this is where the commission may have had some concern and discussion. And so the couple of points we'd like to make in regards to that. In the original application materials, I think I mentioned at the previous meeting, the applicant did provide a property condition assessment. That's a report prepared by a licensed engineer, as well as a pest control report. And both of those reports did identify some dry rot or wood conditions that needed to be repaired. And those were the 2 conditions that we were talking about last time at the meeting. So on the use permit renewal, conditions of approval 11 and 13. So they are required to rectify those conditions and demonstrate to staff who did it and when. Anytime there's a project like this that's phased over a great amount of time and multiple contractors have worked on it, we want to make sure that those conditions are rectified and we have clear documentation in the file as to who did it and when. So that's why those conditions were worded in that manner. And then, remember we talked about it briefly, but there was an issue about a code enforcement case, and so to elaborate on that, we did receive a complaint of a potential work being covered up, dry rot conditions being covered up. Our building official did go out to the site at that time. We did open a code enforcement case. They did get a separate permit for that work. The work was inspected, completed, and that permit was finalized. And so that addressed those specific concerns that came up. And there were about 2 other locations on the property where we know of for sure that they encountered dry rot conditions. 2 of those locations were inspected by an outside inspector as well as by our building inspectors. And those conditions were rectified in the appropriate manner. There was a question in the email about ADA facilities. This is not from the meeting, but from a separate email that we received from a resident. And this goes back to the 2009 approval. We haven't talked about this in some time, but because of the age of the building and the use of the building and the fact that there are not common facilities, there are certain exceptions for ADA facilities. And so that was a determination that was made back in 2009 that the project did not have to be ADA compliant. The application made the choice of installing a new ramp at the front of the building that complies with ADA in terms of width and the slope and those types of things, just to make an improvement to the property. And you may recall that the facility did originally in the plans have an ADA parking space in the front. When they went in for the final survey and engineering, they found that a legal ADA parking space couldn't be constructed in that location because of the slope constraints, the property line, the existing building, and then a retaining wall. It physically wouldn't fit in compliance. And so the applicant elected not to install that ADA parking space because you would never want an ADA parking space that doesn't comply with those regulations, because then they would incur some liability for doing that. And so what they did is to demonstrate and left a letter in the file that should somebody wish to purchase a condominium at the time that they go up for sale, if somebody with a disability wished to purchase one, then they could then work on what site changes they would need to make in order to accommodate that person and their parking needs. So in summary, we appreciate the kind of care and concern and thought that you gave to these issues. We've had an opportunity to go back and look at all of the records and really ensure for you and for the residents that these issues have been inspected well and completely. We do believe that they have. If any additional issues come up as we're working through this final phase of closing out the building permit, we'll certainly be looking at those closely. And the applicant is well aware of the expectations, I believe, going forward in terms of what the interior construction needs to be and what that process needs to be. So I have some of the other documentation if you had any other specific questions for us tonight. Otherwise, thank you.
Any questions? No? Laura, thank you very much for a very thorough presentation. All right. And selection of Architectural Review Committee members for June 13th. I'm in. Sure. Kevin?
I'm happy to be a backup.
Okay.
It's graduation.
Ferry? Okay. Thank you. Any Planning Commission discussion?
Yeah, through the chair.
Please.
I didn't bring this up after Laura's report because I actually abstained from that item because of a conflict. So I'm kind of speaking in general and not on that one account. I don't understand where we kind of go in depth on a project like that when we don't go in depth on all the projects just because we have neighborhood complaints. We have many condominium places around, and we get complaints from residences and shopping centers and other larger buildings around, and we've never gone into detail on other ones. And I'm just kind of curious why we had to go into detail on this one and not other ones. If I can ask that, since I have to abstain, I don't want to get myself or staff in trouble. So I think I'm speaking in general, not just in this project.
Through the chair, I asked Laura to do that research, and I also spoke to the building inspector, Luca Miranda, who was responsible for doing the majority of the inspections on that project. And the reason I did that was there was enough discussion and controversy, I thought, at that meeting on this particular item that I wanted to make sure that the questions and comments of the public members that came that night and in the follow-up email were addressed. We felt confident in our staff presentation at the last meeting that all was in order, that there were conditions of approval that were yet to be satisfied that would address any outstanding matters. But we wanted to make sure that we thoroughly looked into this and we could respond back to you to give you assurance and to any public members who may have had some concerns. So I think Laura, Luca Miranda, and myself went out to the site. We walked the site. We researched the files. So we were very assured that all is in order and that the remaining conditions that need to be satisfied will address any remaining concerns.
Okay, thank you.
Through the chair.
Please.
I have two projects that came through the commission a few years back, and actually just one project. And this is regarding Melody Toyota. There was a project about a couple of years ago where one of the residents was complaining about lights shining through the window, and we left the discussion with, or the planning commission left the discussion with the applicant and the homeowner having a discussion offline with the planning staff. But I see those lights back on. I think they were shut down for a little bit and then turned back on. So I wanted to report that, and I wanted to see if there was a follow-through. It's pretty rare. I remember that because that applicant saw the televised planning commission meeting and ran down here to lodge a complaint.
What was the address?
It's the Melody Toyota lot, and essentially
okay.
behind it
Okay.
was the resident. and I see those lights turned back on, and they're shining through the street again. So I wanted to bring that to the city's attention. If there was an agreement made and they're not keeping up with it, I'd like for it to be followed through on. The second comment was regarding treetops. A few months back, I asked about the status of the bioswale in front of the, I guess it's the community building. It looks like that bioswale is not up to par. It will not retain any water. It's just there as an architectural, landscape architecture feature. And I wanted some follow through on that to see if it actually meets the intent of the civil engineer's drawings. Because that's one of the things that we approved as the Planning Commission. I want to see a follow through on it because we don't have many bioswales in this area.
I recall that conversation. And I don't know the specific bioswale, and I personally did not go to the site, but our development review engineer I know has been to the site. And we have also increased the scope of work of CSG engineers that you're familiar with that does our plan check services, but they also provide our C3 stormwater review services. So we have an outside firm that helps us to review the C3 stormwater treatment measures that include things like those bioswales. We've increased their scope of work a little bit, and they are assisting with inspections as well.
Okay.
So I know that they have been up to the site at least once. I don't know if there were corrections or if there are going to be changes, but we are actively reviewing it.
Okay.
And getting real experts in C3 to assist with those inspections as well.
Okay. Thanks.
Anyone else? I'd just like to thank staff for the very thorough follow-through on all of those projects. It makes me feel much better to sit up here and make decisions knowing that we have good information. So thank you very much. Dave, once again, welcome to CM Bruno. And with that, we are adjourned.